All right, good evening. Welcome to our new time slot. For those that are thinking of coming on later this week, 8 o'clock is the new Zman, right? Remembering to count Omer at the end of the Daf. So that'll be our reminder. Yeah. We'll get to the end of the Daf, count the Omer. And
last night was 11.
It was, that's right. Yeah. And also Wednesday special time, 8:30, right? But all the rest of the week?
Regular time.
No, the regular time is 8.
Yeah. Original regular time.
Okay, we're not getting confused.
The old time.
The regular time is now 8 o'clock.
Yes.
The special time is 8:30. Okay?
Perfect.
Now, we're at the next Mishnah.
Yes.
After we talk about our sponsors, right? Our amazing sponsors for the month. Daf Yomi sponsors for the month, Jeff and Chava Bela Wald. Lili Nishmas, Jeff's father, Mr. Roman Wald, Avram ben Shmuel, Zichron L'Rocha, and grandfather, Mr. Menachem Eisner, Menachem Mendel ben Mordechai, Zichron L'Rocha, whose yortzeit were in Rosh Chodesh Nisan. May their neshamos have an aliyah. And Daf Yomi also for the month is sponsored by Shmuli and Miriam Fuchs, Lili Nishmas Shmuli's mother, Bela Yenta Bas Chuna, Zichron L'Rocha, whose yortzeit is on Rosh Chodesh Iyar. And may her neshama have aliyah, and we will be looking for new sponsors come this Sunday morning. Yeah. So if you're thinking that now you realize the name recognition after you've had like every day for the entire month, you've listened to the shiur, and
ER is a great month.
ER is a great month.
Yeah. It's a month of donkeys.
That's how we've heard last night. Okay. Onward we go. Mm-hmm. Mishnah says there are seven midos shalach hayubamikdash. They were liquid measures, right? We talked about the dry measures yesterday. Mm-hmm. There's 7 different containers, 7 different types of liquid measures, and they are the hin, a hin, which is 12 lug, and if we start doing the math, a hin is 12 lug. 3 ounces is a revius of a lug, right? So about 12 ounces is, so it's 144 ounces. So if somebody's got your calculator, figure out how many 144 ounces in terms of liters. How many liters are in 144 ounces? You can figure it out. How many liters are in 144 ounces? I think it's there's about 4 liters, if I remember, a hin, right? That's 144 ounces is our estimation. You can ask us how many liters is in a hin. They would probably know the answer to that.
That'd be interesting.
They're probably
140 ounces.
Sorry?
144.
Yeah. Right? Just to be able to get a sense of our measure size.
Give me a few seconds here.
Okay, good. The calculator is calculating.
Mm-hmm. The usual calculator person.
That's right. And so it says, right, they are the hin, which is a full size, a chatzi hin, which is half of that hin, which we'll draw to keep it nice and simple. This is the half hin measure, right? Half.
Are you talking about like fluid ounces?
Yes, yeah. I am.
Because if it was US fluid ounce, it would be 4.259.
Okay, good. I got it about right. That's good. Okay, so that's the size here. It's about a 4 liter, which is about a gallon, right? So it's about a gallon. The hin is about a gallon. Okay, so chatzi hin. We have a shlishis hin. That's the third of a hin, right? That's 1/3 of a hin. There's another one. And then we've got a revius hin. You've got a quarter hin measurement, which is not necessarily to scale. Right? That's our quarter hin measurement. And a lug, right? Lug we said was 1/12 of a hin, right? So that's going to be, this was 1/4. So about here.
You know what this reminds me of? When back in school, when we used to fill up these water bottles with different colored sand.
There you go. So that's what it is. That's our lug, right? Then we've got a chatzi lug and a revius lug. A half a lug, and we've got a quarter lug. So we'll draw those, right? A half a lug. And we've got, it's a good thing we've got all these colors. And then we've got our quarter lug. Okay, so we've got all of those measurements. Does that equal 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No, the hin is the whole one. Right? The hin is the whole one. So that's good. So I've got all of our ways to remember how much of the container that we are going to fill. So Rabbi Eliezer Bar Rabbi Tzadok Omer, Rabbi Eliezer Bar Rabbi Tzadok says, Shnosos hayu behin. They didn't actually have separate containers. They had a container like this, and the container had markings on the side, little measurements along the side. That's what Rashi is drawing. Yehuda had pointed out that Rashi, a little picture. That's what Rashi is trying to draw over there. And what's neat is when the Mesifta comes along and rewrites all the Rashi pictures in order to make them nicer. So it makes the picture nicer. You can't see it blew it up nicer in the notes, right? But that is a picture of. Ad kan would say, right, in the container, it would say ad kan lepar. This is how much you need for the bowl. V'ad kan l'ayil, v'ad kan lekeves. Right, you would have the half a hin would tell you that is where the par gets, and at the third of the hin, that's where the ram gets, and the quarter hin, that's where the sheep gets. And so therefore, you could just read the side of the container and look at your animal and match it up. Rabbi Shimon says, Lo hayasham hin. There was no hin. They didn't have a hin, because after all, what would you use the hin for? The bull gets half a hin. So the biggest measurement you needed was a hin. You don't need a half hin. You don't need the whole hin. So Ella mida yisera shel lug umechza haisasham. There was, in his point of view, there was a container that was a lug and a half. That because they had a tradition that there were 7 containers, and so therefore he adds a container of 1.5. We're going to see what that one's for. Shebahaya moded leminchas kohen gadol. That was for the mincha of the kohen gadol, right? Because their mincha of the kohen gadol needs 3 lug of oil, so they would bring the 3 lug together, and then they would then after that they would be able to split it in half and have 1.5. Lugu mechza baboker, 1.5 in the morning, and lugu mechza ben arbayim, and 1.5 at in the evening. So says the Gemara, Tana Rabbanan, Sheva midus shalach hayu b'mikdash. There were 7 types of measurements, 7 containers for measurements of liquids in the Beis HaMikdash. They go from the bottom up in this one. Revi'is lug, the quarter lug, chatzi lug, the half lug, the full lug. The revi'is ahin, the quarter of the hin, shlishis hin, the third of the hin, chatzi ahin, the half a hin, and vahin, and the hin. Div Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Meir Omer, hin, Rabbi Meir says, no, they were the hin, the chatzi hin, shlishis ahin, revi'is ahin, lug, chatzi lug, or revi'is lug. Sounds like the same list, just backwards, right? So hang on. So Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Shimon says, Lo yasham hin. There was no hin there, says Rabbi Shimon. V'chi mehaya hin mishamish. Because what would be the purpose of having a hin for? They would need such a thing. Peichas amid aleph, as mi avi tachtav. So therefore, I need to have a replacement. What am I going to bring instead? There was a 1.5 lug container that was there. That's what they would use to measure the offering of the Kohen Gadol, which was brought all together, but then got split in half. Half of it was brought in the morning, so 1.5 in the morning and 1.5 in the afternoon. Amrulo, so they said to the Chum said to Rabbi Shimon, why would you need to bring a 1.5? I've already got a half a lug container. Just bring a half a lug 3 times. I can measure a lug and a half using a half lug container. I don't need that one. So Amar Lahem, so Rabbi Shimon says back to them, Af l'divrechem, according to you, chatzi lug v'lug lo yaseh. Why do you need to make a half a lug or a whole lug, right? Revi'as haisasham. Once you've got a quarter lug, it's just a matter of refilling it over and over and over again, right? You don't need right? If you've got your measurements at home, you need to have a cup. As long as you've got 1/8 of a cup, you could have a quarter cup, you could have half a cup, just a matter of how many times you fill it up. You can use the quarter lug in order to fill the whole thing. Ella, so rather zehaklal. This is the rule, Kaya b'mikdash. This is the rule they had in the Beis HaMikdash. Kli shemishamesh midazu, eno mishamesh mida acheres. If the utensil was needed, if the right measurement was needed, then they didn't bring the wrong measurement. In other words, he's telling Rabbi Shimon is saying that's why they had a 1.5. They wouldn't use a half a lug measurement for anything, because for a 1.5 measurement, because the rule was if you needed a half a lug, you used the half a lug container. If you needed a quarter, you used the quarter. You don't use the quarter twice. That's the rule they had in the Beis HaMikdash. Okay.
If you did use it twice, would you get punished?
I don't think you get punished, right? We don't have the idea of them being punished. And would the offering be valid? Would be the question. It sounds like the offering would be valid. It just sounds like this is a klal. This is the rule that they had in the Beis Hamikdash. But you have the right amount of oil at the end of the day, right? This is just the rule for the measurements. Okay. Ma'ika bein Rabbi Meir Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda list the measurements. One just starts with a hin and works his way down, and one starts with a quarter lug and works his way up. What's the difference? Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Beirutze midos ika beinaihu. The question is, the overflow. Well, we have something called surface tension. Science lesson. Sorry?
The viscosity?
The viscosity. Very good. Very good. All right. Somebody's paying attention. Okay. If I am looking sideways at my Kiddush cup and I fill it all the way up to the top with purple grape juice.
Use grape juice?
Wow.
If I said if. I fill it up, it overflows the very top without falling over. Okay? That is based on its viscosity, right? The higher the surface, the higher the tension, right? The more it'll stay in, right? If it's thicker liquid, it'll rise a little bit higher. But that is this extra over. That's not quite an overflow because it doesn't drip out, but it is this extra over that is standing. It's called the Beirutzim, right? That's what we call it, Beirutzi. The Beirutzi, this overflow. Surface tension is the scientific term for it, right? That it actually overflows but doesn't go out the side because it's leaning inward into the cup and gets held up by the other liquid inside the cup. The surface tension.
So it appears to be higher than the actual.
That's correct. It is higher than the actual edge of the cup. Okay. So, Laman Amar Mimata Lamala, according to the opinion that says they were counting from from Rabbi Yehuda, he counted from the lower numbers up. Kasavar Beirutze Midos Niskadshu. He holds that the extra overflow is sanctified. That extra little bit that you put in, that goes in, it is part of the measurement. Uravias Yohiv Le Rachmana Lamoshe. And so therefore, what happened was the revius, this little small revius that we had, the revius halug, that's what we call our revius. That's the amount that we put in our Kiddush cups to drink, right? That's the revius halug. So that was the measurement that Hashem gave to Moshe. He said, here you go. Moshe would fill it up, right? And then whatever the surface overflow would then mean that now would get two of those would be a half a lug. So the quarter lug is slightly larger than a flat quarter lug. So therefore they would pour that in, and then that container, the half a lug, would be the size of that container with that overflow. So therefore, by starting from the bottom and working your way up, you're actually making v'amar le sha'er dekai lehu berutzin. So what we've got to do is we've got to make all of these extra, every measurement that is higher up a little bit larger to contain the slight overflow of the measurement below it, because there's two surface tensions that now go into the half. And then the half, as we go up to the lug, there's two of those to the lug. So each measurement has to be slightly larger than the actual internal size, the internal volume of the size below it. Make sense? Okay. Laman da'amar mimal lamata, the opinion that says, no, we're going to start at the top and work our way down. Kasavar birutse midos lo niskadshu. Their opinion is that extra that's over the top is not sanctified. Because hin yahiv le rachmana l'Moshe, Hashem gave Moshe the hin, the large measurement. Va'amar le sha'er baha. Take this hin, divide it in half. That's half a hin. Divide it into quarter. That's a quarter of a hin. Which means that there was nothing over the top, because you literally had a hin that was exact. Half of that is exactly the half. Nothing goes over the top. So therefore, dekanafke berutzen. So therefore, that is the if anything did overfill the top, when you poured it into the smaller container, it would roll over the outside of that smaller container and be gone. So therefore, that is the argument between the two, whether that overflow, the extra over the top, is sanctified or not. Okay, Abaye Amar, that is opinion number one as to what they're arguing about. Abaye says no. Dekuli Ama Beirutze Hamidos Ika Lememar Niskachu, Vika Lememar Lo Niskachu. Abaye says that is not what the argument about. Whether you go up from whether you're counting the measurements from the top to the bottom or from the bottom to the top is irrelevant to this issue of overflow of this surface tension. The argument is the fact that it says that you need malayim, full. Right? The korban of the Nesiim, it says that shnehem malayim solas. They were bringing bowls that were full of solas, liquid measurements, but they were full of solas. Man de Omar milmala lamata, the one who says that they were filling it, that you counted from the upper ones to the lower ones, kasavar malayim shelo yechsar v'shelo yosir. Fill means that there was no missing anything. It was no extras, and there was nothing missing. It was full of solas. So therefore, same thing, that is the amount by the liquid measure in the Beis HaMikdash, can't have anything missing, can't have anything extra. Therefore, he showed him the upper utensils, so that you can now, from the top, work your way down. And you would always be dividing from the hin. Amanda Amar Mimata Lamala, the one who says that you're going to start from the bottom measurements and work your way up. Milayim, what does the word milayim means? Shelo yechaser. You can't be missing anything about yosir, but if it has a little bit extra, milayim karino be, that is considered malay. So therefore, if you're going to take two revius and you're going to mix them together to get a chatzi lug, and there's going to be a little bit extra in that, what would be the amount that you would fill in a half a lug by itself, he says, because every, I guess there's a little bit extra or whatever at the top. So that extra is fine, right? That's still considered malayim. That's still fine. But it would be only missing that you could not have. Okay, but it's not a matter of whether it sanctifies or it doesn't sanctify. It may or it may not, but the extra doesn't ruin the korban, is the point. Okay. Amar Mar, we learned in a brisa. Rabbi Shimon says, Lo haya sham hin. There was no hin measurement there. Shapir kamar lu Rabbi Shimon Rabban. Rabbi Shimon is saying very nicely, Rabban, there's nothing in the Torah. You won't find a korban that requires a hin. Half a hin is the most. So, the Rabbanon have a hin David Moshe L'Shem Mishcha. The Rabbanon said, yes, there was. When they made the anointing oil in the first place, they needed a hin of oil. So they used a hin utensil for that purpose. Dichsiv, the pasuk says, v'shemen zayis hin. They took a hin of oil for the anointing oil that they prepared. So Mar Savar kevan dilidoros lo havatzarech lefisha hu avdei ve'ignos. So Rabbi Shimon says they didn't use it ever. They made the anointing oil the one time when they were in the desert, in the Mishkan, and they anointed all the utensils. From then on, whenever you made new utensils, they didn't get anointed, they just became they became sanctified through service. So you never needed the oil, plus you never had to make any new oil anyway, because the oil miraculously never ran out. So they kept using the oil and it still had a full container. So Rabbi Shimon said they never needed to make a new utensil. They made it the first time, and then they put it away, and they never used it again, so they never needed one like that. The idach and the chamsek came into hava. No, that was on the shelf. So once they had it on the shelf, they continuously had a full set of utensils. It just comes with the set. Okay, so Amar Mar. Okay, so now Rabbi Shimon says, Ves mi avi tachtov. Which one am I going to put instead? So log lo sagya de lo mile. Why does he have to put one instead? So let him say there's only 6 measurements. He doesn't need 7. So then Kadamar Ravina, like Ravina said, Gemiri, there was a tradition, a halacha l'Moshe misinai, about 3 things. First of all, that there are 2 sacrifices that we will learn about in the next parak that are normally leaning on an animal is an individual korban thing to do. Right? If I'm bringing a shlamim, I lean on it. If I'm bringing a chatos, I lean on it. If I'm bringing an asham, I lean on it. I lean on my personal korbanos. Korbanos tzibur, right, do not require leaning. The 2 exceptions are the parhelam davar, for sure. That's the one that Beis Din, we learned in Masechah Sanhedrin. We either needed 3 members of Beis Din or 5 members of Beis Din in machlokas, whether who had to lean on it. And then the second korban is going to be subject to a machlokas, which we will see later on. But there are 2 of them. And that's why there's an argument about whether there's what the second one is, because you can't have an argument and just say there's only one. or that there's 3. There have to be 2. Hachanami, here too, Gemiri desheva midos shalach hayu b'mikdash. There were 7 liquid containers in the Beis HaMikdash. Next, Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Tzadok omer shnosos hayu bahim. Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Tzadok said in our Mishnah that there were just measurements. There was 1 utensil and there were measurements. V'leisle sheva midos. How could he say that? We just said there was a tradition that there were 7 utensils. So leisle, what he doesn't hold of that. V'boy seima. So leisle, first answer is no. He doesn't hold of that tradition. He doesn't require 7. V'boy seima. My sheva midos. What does it mean that there were 7 measures? Sheva mididos. There were 7 measurements. That's all. It's all the 1 utensil, 7 measurements. Okay. Says the next Mishnah. Revius. Now let's go through what each one was used for. Each of these utensils, right? When did we use each of these measurements? So let's start from the bottom. Revius, quarter lug. Mehaya mishmesh, was that used for? Revius mayim limitzora. That was used for a quarter of a lug of water that was part of the tsaras. Right? We have Tazria Mitzora parsha this week. That we're going to learn that you shacht a bird, and you take 1 bird and you shacht it onto some water. Now you need to be able to put we know that birds don't have a lot of blood. You need to put a drop of blood into water in the amount that the blood is recognizable that there's blood in it.
But so it's still a little diluted, isn't it?
So it's going to be diluted, but it's not going to be so diluted that it loses its color. So how much is that? Quarter of a lug. That's about 3-4 ounces. Revius shemen linazir, and there's a quarter of a lug of oil that's part of the nazir. Right? They would take the chalos and the rakikin that the nazir brought when he brings his nazirus offerings, and they would put oil on the top of it. Right? They would put the oil on the top of those matzos that came with the nazir offering, and that was a quarter of a lug of oil. Chatzi lug ma'ayim mishamish. What was the half a lug used for? Chatzi lug mayim lesota. It was the half a lug that was part of the sota water, right? We would take the water and we dissolve the parchment that the sota would drink. That was going to be half a lug. And the chatzi lug shemen lesoda. Also a half a lug of oil for the toda. Remember that there were 3 types of loaves. We had the revucha, the one that we didn't have. The chalos and the rekikin was done by the nazir. The revucha, the scalded one, was not. We are going to see later on that despite the fact that there's 3 sets, rather there's 2 sets by nazir, it's a quarter lug, 3 sets, and we've got half a lug. Ubelug hayamoded b'chol menachos. The lug measurement, that's the amount of oil that comes with all mincha offerings. All the times we've been talking about the mincha, we add the oil. How much oil? A lug. That's how much oil. Afilu mincha shel shishim isaron. Now this is the rule. If a person's allowed to donate up until a 60 isaron offering. Now that means, why is that going to be? We're going to see that that's because if you have it, we have this rule of kol haroi lebila is considered a bila. Basically, the largest container, the mixing container that had in the Beis HaMikdash could hold 60 isronos with the oil, and you could mix it up. If you added 61, the container would overflow. So therefore,
were the containers heavy?
The container must have been heavy if it's large enough to hold 60 isronos, right? It's a lot. So it's a very large container. And however, you cannot have it. They didn't have a larger container than that. You couldn't make a single offering larger than that. If you wanted to bring more than that, you had to bring it as a second offering. Okay? So now, let's add 60 isronos, and I want to give oil with the 60 isronos. So what do? Nosin lashishim lug. I have to give 60 lug, but I didn't pour it into a 60 lug container. I took the 1 lug container and I poured it 60 times. That's how it would work. Rabbi Elazar and Yaakov says, which is the same way we do it by the Isaron, right? Isaron was 1 Isaron, we filled 1 Isaron at a time also. We did the same way. Rabbi Elazar and Yaakov says, Afilu mincha shel shishim Isaron in la ela luga. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon learns it differently. He says that no matter the amount of flour that's in the offering that you're donating, it's only 1 lug of oil regardless. So you never add, it's not like if you have a 60 lug one, you have to add 60 isaron flour offering, you add 60 lug of oil. You just add the 1 lug and you're done. Shnamar, as the pasuk says, lemincha velug shemen, right? This is the whole pasuk is v'isaron solos echad balul shemen lemincha velug shemen. You're always going to add 1 lug of shemen, no matter what the size of the mincha is. Okay, next one, shisha. the 6 lug measurements. 6 lug measurements is the half a hin size, right? 6 lug equals half. That's about, it looks sort of right? What is that for? That's lepar. That's for the bull, right? Because remember, 1 lug, 12 lug is a hin. So 1/6 of a lug is a half a hin. So arba'a and 4 lug is for an ayil, and shlosha is for a keves. 3 lug is for a sheep, right? Remember that we're talking about lug. We're working our way backwards. That's correct. Because 6 hin is a half, 4 hin is a third, right? A third of 12, and 3 lugin is a quarter of 12. Okay, so the numbers work out, right? You're right. We're just working our way the reverse now. Shlosha umechza, 3.5 lug is lechatzi lug is the menorah. That's what we need for the menorah. Chatzi lug l'chol ner, because they used half a lug for every candle. They filled half a lug of oil for each of the containers, and therefore you needed 7 halves. So that's 3.5. Okay. Which is important to note that the nights are not always the same length. So you'd think that they would add more oil to be able to last through the winter months and shorter to blessed at the summer. They didn't. They just changed the thickness of the wick so that it would burn more. Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't matter. Chatzi lug is the amount, and that was that. Says the Gemara. Yosef Rabbi the Kashale. So Rabbi was sitting and learning, and he had the following question: Revius lama nimshecha. So why were they anointing, when they anointed all the utensils, why did they sanctify and anoint the 1/4 lug container, right? If you're going to tell me it's because the water that we learned that we just used in the Metzora offering, so we are now in Pechas Amabez. Wow. Chutz hu. So that isn't a sanctified utensil. That service, right, can be done anywhere. We're going to see with Saras, that service doesn't even need to be done in the Beis HaMikdash. You slaughter the bird, and you're going to take this blood, and it's going to drop into the water. You don't need to do that in the Beis HaMikdash. So therefore, this container doesn't need to be sanctified for that. The nazir, what was the other thing the quarter was used for the oil of the nazir? So lechem nazir b'shchitas ayohu dekadish. Remember that the bread of the nazir becomes sanctified. It goes together with the ram that's brought of the nazir. When you slaughter the ram, the bread becomes sanctified, which means that the bread before that point is not sanctified. Which means that there's no reason to measure the ingredients in sanctified utensils, which would sanctify the ingredients. You should measure it in unsanctified utensils so that you can make this bread unsanctified and then sanctify it when you slaughter the sheep. A ram, sorry. So Amarli Rabbi Chia says, good point. Here's what the issue is. They used to use this container in order to measure the lug for the Kohen Gadol, right? Because there were 3 lug of oil for the total offering, and there were 12 chalos that were brought. So if you do the math, right, you're going to divide that up. That makes a quarter of a lug of oil for each loaf. Revi shemen lekochala v'chala. So they needed to measure it out. So Koriyale me eretz merchak ish atzasi. So he said that it's a beautiful. From this faraway land comes a man with good advice, right? Where's faraway land? Because Rabbi Chia came from Bavel, right? Rebbe is in Eretz Yisrael. So here comes Rabbi Chia to learn in Eretz Yisrael, and he brings this amazing good answer to why they needed the quarter lug container to be sanctified. It had nothing to do with the offerings that the Mishnah is talking about. It was for the Chavite Kohen Gadol in order to divide up the oil evenly for all the loaves. Okay, the Mishnah says, Chatzi lug mer haya mishamish. What was the half a lug used for? So Yosef Rebbe v'kakashale. So Rebbe was wondering about this half a lug. Chatzi lug lama nimshach. Why did they have to anoint the half a lug? Isota, if it's for the sota water, v'chichulun hu detzricha l'kedushay. So is the water was already sanctified. The water came from the kior. And the kior is already a sanctified utensil. So it was not unsanctified water that you had to pour it into a sanctified container to sanctify it. It was already pre-sanctified, so I don't need it for that. Mayim kedushim ksiv. It says by the sota, it needs to be holy water. right? What is the holy water? It says it's taken from the kior. Toda. What about if we're using it for the oil of the toda, as we said, right? We're going to use it for the oil of the loaves of the toda. Remember, we needed to put half a lug of oil into the menorah. So therefore, we divided it up, half of a lug of oil into every one of the candelabras in the menorah. So that's why, remember we just said in the Mishnah they had 3.5 lug for the menorah. Well, they didn't measure it in 3.5. They measured it in half, 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 half. So Amar Lo, so Rabbi said about him, Ner Yisrael. He says that you are the candle of Israel, right? That's what he called him. Kahal. That is in fact how it was. That is the right answer. So there you go. Who is Ner Yisrael? Ner Yisrael is, who was that answer? That was Rabbi Shimon Rabbi, right? Rabbi Shimon. Good. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Good trivia question. Who is Ner Yisrael? Rabbi Shimon. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Rabbi. Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi, Ner Shekovsa. Okay, let's talk about the menorah and the base of Mikdash for a moment. Okay, when the candles would go out in the menorah, nidoshin hashemen, nidoshna hapsila. So just like you have to, the oil is used up. You've got to take out the, take the wick out, right? It's all made, right? So that's you got to take the remainder of the oil out and the remainder of the wick out, clear it out. Ketzad osa. How do you do that? Right? How are you going to get it out? Meitiva. V'nosim b'shemen umadlika. What you've got to do is you've got to clean out the menorah cup, and then you've got to put new oil in it, and then you relight it. Okay. Yosef Rabbi Zrika v'kami boili. Rabbi Zrika was sitting around, and he had the following question: Kishunosim b'shemen, when you are putting oil in to the container, into the menorah, Kemida rishona o kimo shechasra. Do we put in a new half a lug of oil when you, right? If the oil, I guess, if it went out, right? This is what happens that was the question, is what happens if it goes out in the middle of the night? So if it goes out in the middle of the night, you clean the whole thing out and you put it in and you relight it. So that leads to his question, how much oil to put in, right? Do we measure how much we took out and then we put in the same amount as what you just took out because you basically are refilling it? If you've got a little bit left, you could just put a little bit more in, or do you have to refill it to the original amount? Refill it with a new half a hin. So Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Pshita de Kamida Rishona. Obviously, you've got to put in the original amount. Why? De'ikma shechasra, because if you're going to have what was missing, minoya dinan my chiser. How do you know what was missing? Right? How are you going to know that? V'chi tema de mishayerle. So why doesn't he just measure it? Right? Put it into a container and measure how much it was. Im kain, if that's true, sheva midos. It says right in the Mishnah, there were only 7 measurements that they had. Nafish lehumidos tuva. You'd need all kinds of levels of measurements in order to measure the theoretical amount of oil that might be left if the candle goes out in the middle of the night. Kari alei. So he said about him, v'hadarcha tzlach rechav al dvar emes ve'anva tzedek. That your glory and your success of a Talmid Chacham is that he is able to figure something out to its truth and to teach it accordingly, appropriately. Right? Okay. Itmar Nami. It has also been said. Amar Rabbi Yavo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yavo said Rabbi Yochanan, the Amri La, Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rabbi Chanina. That was Rabbi Abu said in Rabbi Chanina. Amar Rebbe, Ner Shekavsa. If the light of the menorah candle goes out, Nidoshin Hashemen, Nidoshna Psila, you've got to clear out the wick, got to clear out the oil. Ketzad Osa, what do? Metiva, you empty it all out, all the way. V'nosin Bashemen, Kimi the Rishon, you put back the original amount, Umadlika, and light it. Okay, so therefore, have a brisa. This brisa says it very clearly what we just figured out. Amar Rav Huna, Breder Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Sheishes, or this wasn't a brisa, this was a statement made in the base medrash that was clearly like what was just said. Amar Rav Huna, Breder Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Sheshes. Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yehuda, said, Amar Rav Sheshes, Ner Shebamigdash shel prakim hava. The candelabra in the Beis Hamikdash was very thin. The actual branch where the cup was very thin, so that you could bend the metal. I guess gold is soft, so you can bend it and tilt it so that they could get all the oil out. when you would light it. Say we didn't know that.
Even with metal, if you use a torch or whatever, it could make it possible.
Yeah, I don't think they were using a torch, right? Of the menorahs, the gold is soft. I think you're about able to bend it. Yeah. So you just gotta make sure that I would imagine bending every day, right? They would eventually break, right?
Yeah.
I would be worried about that too.
Huh.
So now Kasavar, he holds kiksiv kikar umiksha. A menorah veneer suksiv. He holds, Rav Sheshes is holding, that when it says in the Torah that you need a kikar of gold that needs to be completely hammered out of one piece, that's both the menorah and the cups. So therefore the cups were not detachable. They had to bend in order to be able to get them. So kevan demi boy hatava, so since they have to be cleaned out well, ilav de prokim havi lo hava mitavule. So if you weren't able to bend them, how would you be able to get all of the oil out? Right? It's going to be very difficult. So therefore, that's why he says it was made thin in such a way, able to be bent. Fine. It says the b'shel prokim, which usually means that they were made in pieces, but it's prokim is that they were so thin that it was as though it was maneuverable, right? Able to be bent. So articulated. That's what this word is. Okay, meisvei. So they asked the following question: Ketzad osa. So here's a question, a brisa that we're going to ask against Rav Sheshes. Ketzad osa, how would they come to clean out the candles that have the lights in the menorah? Misalkon, they would take the cup off. It was detachable. Umanichan ba'ohel, but they would keep it inside of the inside the tent, inside of the Mishkan. Umekanchen bisfog, and then they would wash it out with a sponge, and then put it back in the menorah. V'nosim ben shemen umadlikon, and then they would put oil in it and light it.
Didn't you have to dry it first because it was fire on water?
I don't know if they use water, right? It doesn't say they use water. It just says they use a sponge.
Wipes them with a sponge, yeah.
Just with a sponge. They wiped it out. Right, and I guess they would let it because it was detachable. So, who de Amar ki haitana? He holds like this Tana that Titania. We're in the Brisa Chachamim Omrim. The Chachamim say lo her mezizin osa mimekoma, that they weren't able. They didn't move the light from its place. What does that mean? That I guess the menorah didn't bend. I'm not sure what that means. Lo hamazizin or samim kom means it doesn't move at all. What is that? How do they translate that?
Yeah, with the lamp, they would not move it from its place.
I guess that means would not move it from its place. Probably means that they would clean it, and when they would remove it, they would leave it in the oil. I guess that's what it's talking about. Right?
Yeah.
So Miklal, and that's what the point is. Miklal di iboy leila zuze matzi mozesle. You need a pasuk to tell me that you can't move it. Why? Because you could move it. Technically, it's physically possible to remove it. So therefore, you need a pasuk to say, don't take it out of the Mishkan because you could have. Ella. So therefore, that means it was detachable. So Ella ema lo haisa zaza mimkoma. So rather, what we have to say in the brisa, we want to change the brisa, and the Chum say that it would not be able to be moved. I guess lo mazizin lo haisa zazam imkoma, that it would not, since it was attached to the menorah, it could not be moved. That was the point that they're trying to say. So therefore, so what is that point, right? They're trying to say that it wasn't removed. I guess that's what they're trying to say. The lesson Bryce says lo haya mazizin. So he's answering it's not. The Bryce is not a contradiction because what the Bryce is saying is it could not have been moved. It could not move. It could not be removed. So they just bent it.
It was then permanently
attached.
Being able to remove it.
Correct. Okay, so that's how he interprets the Bryce. Uman chachamim. Who are these chachamim that are listed in the Brisa? Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Tzadoku. This is Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Tzadok's opinion. Ditanya, we learn in the Brisa. Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Tzadokum, Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Tzadok says, Kimin tas shel zahav hayala al gaba. The menorah was shaped like a boat.
Like that or differently?
Differently. The tips of the menorah he has a picture here, so I'm going to try to draw it as nicely as I can. Right, it has like a boat rounded edge to it, and then it was round on that side. Right, so therefore, kind of, let's make it pointier. Let's make it pointier. Boat edge on one side. Okay, so that's what was happening. Each nair had a boat side attached to it. Keshehu mativa, when you went to clean it, dochko, and it had a tas. A tas was a lid, which would be like they had some kind of a rounded lid that would go over the top of this portion of it. Okay, so this tas that was on it. So when you went to go to clean it, so then dochko, you would push this tas klape piha. You would push it this way towards the opening end of it, so that the wider portion would be exposed, and you'd be able to get in there and clean it well. Keshu nosin boshemen, when you would put oil on it, so that would be so dochko klape rosha. You would pour it back this way, so that the oil would go into it that way. Okay, so I guess that way there's a hole in it. He's got this, my picture is decent, right? He's got his little picture here that each of the candle things looked sort of like that with a lid. You push forward and backward. Okay. So now, ubeplugta dehai tanai. So now here's the argument, right, about between Rav Sheshes and the Braisos about the Neros, whether they were connected or disconnected. It's this machlokas dehani tanai. The Tanya Werner Braisa. The menorah v'neroseha, and the candles that come with it, bos min hakikar, they are part of the full block of gold. Ein malkocheho machtosel min hakikar. But the tongs and the tweezers that they had, that was made separately. Those were gold, but they were made separately. Rabbi Nechemia says, menorah haisa bal min hakikar. The menorah came from one solid piece. V'lo neroseho umalkocheho machtosel bos min hakikar. But the bowls where they contained the oil itself and the tongs and the tweezers were separate. So b'maika miflagi, what are they arguing about? B'haikra, they're arguing about how to interpret this pasuk to Tanya Werner Brisa. Kikar zohav tahor ya'aseh osa. You're supposed to make the menorah one solid kikar. Lamanush lemenorah sheba'al min hakikar. The menorah is made of a kikar. Minayin lerabos neroseh. How do I know also the light parts itself, the bowls itself? Talmud lomar es kol hakelim ha'eleh. The pasuk says all of these utensils. So therefore, all of the utensils are also part of this kikar. Pasuk says es kol hakelim ha'eleh. Yochel shanimar ba'afmal kocheha u'machtoseh. I might think then the tweezers and the tongs are also included. Talmud lomar, the pasuk says osa, right? You're supposed to make the menorah out of the gold, not everything else. Divrei Rabbi Nechemia. That's how Rabbi Nechemia learns it. Okay, so now we have a problem. Kasha de Rabbi Nechemia ad Rabbi Nechemia. Right? We had one brisa that said that quoted Rabbi Nechemia as saying that the cups were part of the menorah, and one that says that they're not. So the answer is Trei Tanai Aliba de Rabbi Nechemia. There are two opinions as to what Rabbi Nechemia held. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha. Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha says, Omer menorah ba min hakikar. The menorah only the menorah itself, not the cups, came from the gold. Vein malkachel machtosel v'nerosel ba min hakikar. Not the tweezers, tongs, or the cups. Ve'ela mani mekayim es kol kimeli. Listen, how do you understand the pasuk that says all of these utensils? Sheyu kelim shel zahav. That they had to make all the utensils, also out of gold, but weren't out of the solid piece. Zahav behed yiksivbo. But one second, you don't need that pasuk. The pasuk says specifically, "Vasisas nerosel shiva." You're supposed to make the neros 7. Vehelas nerosel ve'ir al aver paneha umakocha machtel zahav tor. You make everything out of gold. So lo nitzrecha ela lefi neros. The answer is the pasuk is telling you that they place where the edge, where the edge here, where the fire actually was lit. That also needs to be made out of pure, perfect gold, like we had learned, that the gold that they used was very fine gold. right? I would have thought that we have a principle. Where the candle comes out, that part gets blackened. So that's going to have to get repaired often. So we would worry about, as we said, we don't want the extra Jews have to pay extra money. So we might have thought that you could use just regular gold, not the special nice gold. So pay testament off.
Gold plated.
No, like regular gold, right? We had said that the gold that they had used was melted down many times to remove all kinds of impurities, right? The levad zahav koldu, just use any gold, kamash malon. So therefore it says no. It had to be this regular type of special fine gold, no matter what. Okay, that was our menorah detour for a moment. Let's talk about the chatzi lug shemen letoda, the half a lug of oil, which was used for the toda offering. So, Tanya, we learn in a brayser. Rabbi Kiva says, "Ma Talmud omer bashemen shtei pamim." Why does the pasuk say bashemen, by the breads of the toda? Pasuk says im, the quote of the pasuk is im al toda yakrivenu v'ikriv al zevach hatoda chalos matzos plus bashemen. Then it says again, we're keeping matzos mishchim bashemen. So you're going to bring chalos that are oil and rakikin that are oil, right? I could have just said chalos and rakikin with oil. So ilu lo nemar ela bashemen echad, if it had only said bashemen one time. Hayisamarehu kechol hamenachos lug. I would have just said you need a lug of oil like any other mincha. Achshav shekosov bashemen. Now it says bashemen twice. Have a riboy achar riboy. This is what we call a inclusion after an inclusion. We're going to expand after expand. And the rule is, when you've got two expansiveness terms, it actually diminishes. So therefore, it's not going to be a full lug. We're going to diminish from the lug to the next size down, and that'll be the half a lug. That's why it says Bashemen twice. Riboy acha riboy, says the Gemara. The Gemara says, 1 second. What are you talking about? This is a expansive term after an expansive term. Chad riboy, there's only one expansive term. If we're going to start off with the word shemen, that's shemen. Then you're going to go shemen, that's the expansive term. The second one is the expansive term. It should go up. We should go from the lug to the quarter, right? We should go to up here. We shouldn't go down. Ella, so rather no. Ilu lo nemar bashemen kol ikar. The reason the first one is expansive term is because if it didn't write oil at all, I would have understood it's a mincha, so it has oil. Therefore, I would have already known it gets a lug. So lug. So therefore, bashemen. So the fact that this is bashemen in the first place is an extra. Then it's a bashemen a second time. That is two expansive terms. That's why we go from the lug down to a half a lug. So the total gets less oil. I might have thought you take half a lug and you split it evenly amongst the three types of breads. Lechalo, because we had three types. Lechalos, rakikin, and the revicha. Keshu omer, when it says bashemen, the extra word bashemen by the revicha, by the scalded loaf, she'ein talmud lomar, riba shemen l'revicha. So therefore, the pasuk, right, I already know that by the chavitin, by the Kohen Gadol, I already know that it has oil. I don't need you to tell me that the Ravichin also has oil. Of course it does. So therefore, we're going to say that the size of the Ravicha is more, the oil in the Ravicha is more than the size of the oil of the Rikikin and the Chalos. So ha'ketzad, how does that work? Mevi chatzi lug shemen, you're going to take half a lug of oil, v'chotzehu, and split that half in half. So now you've got a quarter and a quarter. Chatzio lechalos Rikikin, half of that quarter, 1/8 and 1/8 goes to each of the chalos and the rekikin. The chetzio, and the other quarter goes to the revicha, goes to the revicha. Okay, good. Amar lo Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says to Rabbi Akiva, Akiva, imatamar b'kol yom kulo b'shem b'shemen einu shmi alecha. Rabbi Akiva, it's a very nice drasha. It says b'shemen b'shemen. You can say that all day long, but that is not the right drasha. That is not where we know this from. Ella chatzi lug shemen letoda v'revius shemen lenazir echad yom. The Shebei Nidal Nida Halach L'Moshe Misinai. Rather, I will tell you, the fact that you need half a lug of oil for the Todah, and the fact that you need a quarter of a lug of oil for a Nazir, and that there are 11 days between each Nida cycle, which we'll discuss in one moment, that is all Halach L'Moshe Misinai. There's no place in the Torah that says that. It's Halach L'Moshe Misinai. That's how you know it. What is the Nida cycle? So from the Torah's perspective, we'll learn this when we get to Maseches Nida. From the Torah's perspective, the way that a menstrual cycle works is that there's a 7-day cycle that's called the Nida cycle. Then, after 7 days, there's an 11-day cycle, which is not Nida. Woman shouldn't be getting her Nida period during that time. That 11-day cycle, if she sees blood during that time, she's a Zava, right? Blood during that time makes her a Zava, not a Nida. A Zava is a different category of Tuma, right? I don't know that there's a good English translation of a Zav or a Zava, but it's blood that comes out in the same way, but during that 11-day period, it has a din of Zava, not a din of Nida. So,
Could it be an sort of infection inside of it?
No, we're going to see in Maseches Nida, it cannot be an infection. It cannot be to a medical cause that is explainable, right? It would be, I guess it has to come from the uterus, as we'll see that in the same sort of a way. We'll learn the rules of each of these when we get to them. But the point is that the 11-day period, if she was a Nida, and then after she's finished being Nida, then she sees blood again, she's not a Nida again. She's a Zava again. Right. Now, from the Torah, that's how the halachos work. That's halach l'mosh misinai. Nowadays, we're stringent, and we consider all blood that we see Nida blood. We're going to see the ramifications and differences in Maseches Nida when we get there. But that's just halach l'mosh misinai. Okay, next. Belug haya moded. They would measure all of the menachos of the size of a lug. So Tana Rabbanan Rabbis from Mitzora Ani, right? So by a poor person who's Mitzora, who has tzaras, who is poor, right? Ksiv, the pasuk says, right? He's poor, so he's not bringing an animal, right? He's bringing his offering from a mincha. So the pasuk says isaron. It's going to be an isaron. Bolul. It's going to be mixed in with oil. Velug, and it's going to have a lug of shemen. Limeid al isaron sheton lug. This tells us the rule that when you have an isaron of flour for mincha, you need a lug of oil to go with it. Divrei Chacham Necham. Rabbi Nechemia, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yaakov Omrim, Afilu mincha shel shishim esronim ein la ela luga. That Rabbi Nechemia and Rabbi Elazar and Yaakov said in our Mishnah, right? And they say it again here, that even if you have a isaron, even if you have 60 isaronos, you only need one lug. It's not 1-to-1. It's not one isaron, one lug, as you say. So if that's the case, what do they use with this pasuk that seems to indicate that you need a lug of oil for every isaron? So he says we need this pasuk in order to teach me what it says about the person who has tzaras, who is poor himself. First of all, the Torah says that you're going to bring one isaron. Ve'idach. And therefore, isaron. The pasuk says that you're poor, you're going to bring one isaron, and you're going to bring oil that comes with it, just to tell you what you're supposed to be. Ve'idach, the other side says, l'gufei lo tzarich. I don't need that to tell me that that's the rule by the mitzorah. Me degoli rachmana gabi mitzorah ashir. The Torah says by a rich mitzorah, that's shlosha korbanos. He has to bring 3 sacrifices. He brings a chatos, an olah, and an asham. Ve'ushlosha esronos, and he brings 3 esronos together with those 3 animals. So here, by the Mitzorah, Dechad Korban, where he's only bringing 1 sacrifice, Chad Isaron, he's going to bring 1 Isaron, right? He brings 1 Isaron for every Korban that he's bringing, so now when he brings only 1 Korban, he has to bring 1 Isaron. The Torah doesn't have to tell me that, so therefore it's extra. Ve'idach, the other one says, no, it's tzrich, I need it, because Salka Daita Chamina might have thought, Hol v'chas rachmana alei lesuye bedalos. Once the Torah is telling you that he's poor, so we're going to let him bring less, maybe he doesn't have to bring a mincha at all. So therefore, it has to tell me that he has to bring an isaron of flour because it's necessary. The idach, the pasuk, the other one says, no, legamri lo ashkechon. There's no such thing as not having to bring anything. There's even a poor person has to bring an offering. The Rabbanan, hi lemincha v'lug shaman my avdi. What do the Rabbanan do with the pasuk that says lemincha v'lug shaman to tell me, according to Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, that it always is going to be 1 lug no matter what? How did they learn that pasuk? So hahu lemisnadev mincha shelo yifchos midavar haton lug. The answer is, pasuk is telling me that if you're going to donate an offering, you could donate it whatever size you want. Don't give less than the amount of flour that is needed to bring a lug. And what is that? Nisaron. That's the minimum size. V'idach, the other one says, Tarti shmas mina. I learned both of those things from that point, right? That you can't bring less than a nisaron. And if you're going to bring more than that, you still bring 1 lug. Okay, place to stop.
I was just getting ready for chakras now. It's already 9:01.
There you go. You can get ready for chakras.
Sure.